All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, I guess all the Social Security questions are starting to get to him after weeks of bobbing and weaving, or attempting to at least, on his Social Security record, including insisting his position has never changed, but also that he used to want freezes and doesn't anymore. Now Biden's trying a new tactic. So rather than attempting to keep all the talking points straight, Biden is just handing out cheat sheets to reporters of what his advisors told him to say.
Mr. Biden, just a clarification on Social Security, your record from earlier. An issue out of it.
For you.
What is this?
All right, Mr. Vice President, do you think Bernie Sanders would be a risk for the party?
You'd ask, so I decided to write it up for you, so you knew.
Thank you. But how should voters consider this?
So weird. So here's a look at the notes that Biden is hilariously passing out rather than actually answering reporter questions, because all that thinking on his feet was just way too much for him. Now, why is Biden going to such lengths to keep his talking points straight? Well, it appears that although he does still remain the top choice of our elders, seniors are starting to drift away from him as the Sanders campaign highlights his long track record of embracing Social Security cuts. So at the same time, as we're going to discuss today with Dan Marins, part of Sanders' closing argument going into Iowa is that he is the best candidate to protect Social Security and to contrast with Trump on that issue. Just take a look at this new ad.
Trump suggesting that he is willing to make cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
Entitlements ever be on your plate?
At some point they will be.
To defeat Trump, we need a nominee who has always fought to protect Social Security.
We are not going to cut the programs that millions of seniors and people with disabilities depend upon. If they vote to cut Social Security, they may well not be returning to Washington.
Now, why is Sanders closing with this? Well, this is actually the ball game in a lot of respects, because even though seniors have begun to move towards him, the basic dynamics of this primary remain what they've been from the very beginning. Biden versus Bernie is an epic generational clash. It is boomers and older versus Gen X and younger. While both candidates have working class support, Biden has a particular strength with African Americans and Bernie has a particular strength with Latinos, the biggest dividing line has always been age. A new poll of college students certainly underscores that point. According to Chegg College Pulse, while 43% of college students back Bernie Sanders, a mere 8% support Biden. That puts him in fourth place behind not only Sanders, but also Elizabeth Warren and Andrew Yang. Meanwhile, despite that movement of our elders, they do continue to strongly favor Biden. Just take a look at this Pew Research poll of voters. You can see that for Sanders, support decreases with every step up the age cohort, and for Biden, it is the exact opposite. The youngest cohort is split between Sanders and Biden by a margin of 40-10. The oldest cohort is perfectly inverse. Sanders garners only 10% to Biden's 40%. So if Bernie can win over just a few more points among seniors, he will be the nominee. Now, what is causing this great generational divide? Well, honestly, it's not hard to figure out. Take a look at this chart of generational wealth. The older you are in this country in general, the better you've done. For boomers, by the time they hit age 35, they collectively own 21% of national wealth. For Gen X, by age 35, they own just 9%. For millennials, though, the situation is even more dire. Currently, they own just 3% of national wealth. The entire generation has been screwed. Sent to fight and die in the nation's endless wars, promised that college was the end-all be-all, only to be saddled with insurmountable debt and graduating into the post-financial crash ruins. Or those who didn't go to college, finding that the only jobs for those lacking a college degree were often not only low-paying, but degrading, with distant bosses who don't see you as humans but numbers on a spreadsheet, or cogs in a machine to be disposed of at will. When younger voters push for greater economic mobility, they're not asking for handouts. They're only asking for the same chance at stability of their parents and their grandparents. Now, I want to be clear. Inequality and the outright abandonment by political elites of the American working class has no generational boundaries. But our elders came of age during a time when worker productivity was actually tied to wage growth, before unions had been gutted and trade deals passed and Walmart and Amazon given unprecedented monopolistic powers to suck the life out of our communities. They came of age during a time when social mobility was at least more of a reality, not a complete myth, when a small-town public education actually was sufficient, And the gig economy and all its hellish anti-worker dystopia had not yet even entered our lexicon. So it makes sense that they would find the let's just pretend none of this happened approach of Joe Biden appealing. Not exciting exactly, but comfortable, safe. And while our elders, too, prefer Bernie's approach on the issues, the relentless pundit drumbeat about how he's a risky choice combined with a lingering Cold War mentality leads them most often to resist feeling the burn. So as we head into Iowa, this is the battle between the old ways and the new. Does the Democratic Party continue to embrace the neoliberal incrementalism that lionizes free markets, makes common cause with conservatives on war, deregulation, and safety net cutting? Or do they reach for something new that is in fact grounded in an older tradition of populism, militant labor movements, and a New Deal embrace of fundamental economic rights? There's an assumption that as generations age, they become more conservative, that once these kids get out there in the real world, they're going to start caring more about low taxes and less about the Green New Deal. First of all, there's no evidence of that throughout history. But second of all, I think if anything, these generations are likely to only become more radicalized, especially if current trends hold, as they get older and can't buy a home or have the stability to start a family, as the damage wrought by climate change becomes more and more evident, increasing flows of climate refugees, as automation, monopoly, and union busting continues to decimate the middle class, preserving the good life for only a rarefied few. There's simply no doubt that the future of the Democratic Party looks like AOC and not Mayor Pete. That much is clear. And in just a few days' time, we're going to find out whether that future has arrived or whether the current regime will cling to power for one more go of it. And if they do, will it be too late to change course? This is really the divide, and it has been from the beginning. I mean, that's one of the things is throughout this coverage of this person popping up and that person popping up, the sort of media darlings of the moment, this divide between Bernie and Biden and their visions of the future and the generations behind those visions is really what has undergirded this whole campaign.
Yeah, and what I love about what you said is that we're not asking for anything new. We have an old tradition in this country of radicalism, of populism, of rising up against, from the Gilded Age. And I think that neoliberalism has really, through their end of history arguments, tried to draw us away from who we are. And that's what I think, what we talk about all the time, is they tried to basically erase the fundamental rules of worker power and economics. They tried to sell us new rules of the way that nation states interact within a global system. They basically tried to rewrite the rules of everything. And what we're doing now is we're not trying to break away and create something new. We're trying to go back to away and create something old.
Yeah.
Like an old balance of power.
Right.
That we came to. That's the craziest thing about American history to me. And when we get derided as crazy radicals, is this, I'm like, no, you're the radical one. You want everybody to believe that it's a moral system in order to look at that wealth chart. And let's say you don't even, morality, fine. From a power perspective, if you're up at that top and you have that amount of wealth in a completely inequitable society, and the only thing people have left in this country, I said this on Tucker a couple nights ago, the only thing workers in this power have anymore, they don't have economic power, they don't have cultural power, they have one last thing, the vote. How do you think they're going to use that?
Yeah.
And nobody here understands that.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And this has been a complete concerted attempt to divide the working class that's happened over generations, to keep them divided so they aren't able to exercise the power that they ultimately have. I had a reporter ask me yesterday what was different about Sanders' campaign this time versus last time. And one of the things is last time around, he tended to ground his ideas in in overseas countries that have single payer, right? In Sweden or whatever. And this time around, he has appropriately and accurately rounded it in the American radical populist tradition. And so I think that's been a much more accurate and much more appealing framing for what he's talking about. And he's always good about it. This isn't crazy to think people should have health care. It's not crazy to think that workers should have power in their workplace. It actually is part of our American tradition that we should get back to. But this is what it comes down to. Who shows up to vote? Who has the energy, and are you able to grab a little bit from this cohort or that cohort, the older generations? Can you bring them around and convince them that this isn't such a scary, wild-eyed approach?
That I don't know. We'll see.
All right, Sagar, looking forward to seeing what's on your radar. That is next.